Hi everyone, welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
I'm Mike.
And we're on day 3 of our Opening the Case Files of Detective Fiction. We've talked about some of the original classics. Poe's Dupin, Holmes, Sherlock Holmes, of course, Hercule Poirot, brilliant individuals who use logic and imagination.
That's right. And yesterday we learned more about cozy mysteries. This is a subgenre, another style of mystery. These are involving often elderly detectives. They don't have to do a lot of crawling around looking for clues or chasing, running, or fighting with the bad guys. No, in cozy mysteries, the crimes are less violent. The crime scenes are often in small communities, not in the big city, but in a small town. The detectives are often female, which is true because it involves, less violent action. And often they are amateurs. So these are not people who work for the police. They just like to solve crimes in their free time, maybe to help their friends out or things like that. And they often find the answer or find the solution to the mystery, not by collecting the clues, but by talking to people, interviewing people, seeing their different relationships, and remembering a lot of facts about the people and the community they're in. So today, which is day 3, the final day, we're going to go in a new direction and meet a totally different kind of detective. And I think you're going to be in for a few surprises with this one.
Reading. Opening the Case Files of Detective Fiction. Harry Dresden, the main character in Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files, is another very different type of detective. Butcher draws inspiration from the hard-boiled detective fiction that became popular in the U.S. in the 1930s. Detectives in these stories are tough and unemotional and work in big cities that are full of corruption. Harry Dresden is this kind of private eye, but he's also a wizard. The Dresden Files is an urban fantasy. It's set in modern-day Chicago, but features magic and supernatural creatures such as fairies and vampires. Dresden investigates magical crimes that are too much for the Chicago police to handle. He's also employed by strange clients. For example, he often looks out for a local monster's son. As Dresden's career progresses, he becomes an even more powerful magic user. He takes on the role of protecting Earth from supernatural forces that want to lay waste to it. There are detectives and detective stories for every taste. If you're a fan of this genre, you're in luck. You'll never run out of wonderful new stories to read.
So the article begins and says, Harry Dresden, the main character in Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files, is another very different type of detective.
Okay, let's find out more about this character. Butcher, that's the author, draws inspiration from the hard-boiled detective fiction that became popular in the U.S. in the 1930s. Okay, so like a lot of artists, he's come up with a new idea, but he's sort of taken some ideas from earlier things that came along, some inspiration from earlier things. Doesn't mean you're copying it, but it basically means, hey, I kind of like that, but I've got my own idea about what to do with that. I've got my own version of what to do with that. And artists do this all the time, right? It's not easy to come up with a completely new idea that no one has ever done before. And maybe as a young person, you really like this person's art, so you've kind of borrowed a few ideas from the style, but then made it new in your own way. But that borrowing, that is your inspiration. And he got inspired, he got his inspiration, inspire would be the verb, from hard-boiled detective fiction from the 1930s. Now I imagine this is not about detectives cooking eggs.
No.
Not hard-boiled like an egg.
No, but they are pretty hard. Yeah, this subgenre, hard-boiled, is another subgenre. It's where people are tough. Life is hard. Cities and governments are corrupt.
Wow, that's a pretty dark place.
Yeah, a lot of these were made into kind of black and white classic movies. The works of artists, writers like Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett. Mickey Spillane. Tough cops, beautiful women, people with lots of secrets and lies. The detectives are often almost committing crimes to try and protect somebody, so they're in trouble with the police as well. It's those kind of stories, basically.
They're kind of more realistic, as we said, darker, and they're interesting too because no one is really a good guy.
Yeah.
You're not sure who you can trust. Even that lady who seems like she's in danger, and you might think she's the one that he will save. Well, she could turn out to be the bad guy, the killer, or whatever. So they're kind of mysterious and dark and fun, but certainly not cozy, not friendly, and not just an easy little fun mystery. There's much more to these stories. It says detectives in these stories are tough and unemotional and work in big cities that are full of corruption. They might have had some kindness and love in their soul, but the big city beat it out of them, made them tough, but also kind of made them a little dark and maybe not the nicest people in the world. But that sometimes happens when the world makes you tough. What is tough? Basically, it's strong. You're able to deal with difficult situations, maybe even able to deal with pain. Okay, if you're a soldier and you spend your life outside sleeping on the ground, eating cold food and that kind of thing, you would be a pretty tough person. If you're a normal city person who gets their food from Uber Eats and lies in bed all day watching TV, if you have to go live in the mountains, you'll probably have a really bad time. You won't enjoy it because you're not tough enough to do that sort of thing. For example, we could say you have to be pretty tough to play professional ice hockey. Yeah, a lot of sports are, hard on the body, but ice hockey, American football, these types of sports, they're definitely tougher. You need to be a tough person to play these games.
And these cops, these detectives, they work in cities full of corruption. Let's find out what that word means. So corruption, this is the idea of dishonest conduct, bad deeds by people in power who use their positions to make money, protect their friends, that kind of thing. Like, oh, this guy's been arrested. Don't worry. His dad is friends with an important politician. He'll get him off, and they will use their contacts to get rich. That is corruption. We do read that kind of news about politicians who are corrupt. That's the adjective form. That is corruption. So it's a tough world full of tough people and corruption, and that's what this story's all about.
That's right. A lot of these books, as we said, were written back in the 30s and 40s, and they're set in that time, often in a big American city or something like that. But there are people who've used those ideas and kind of given them an interesting spin. They took inspiration from this style of writing, but they gave it their own personal twist. Some of these are actually quite interesting. Next one we read is Harry Dresden. So this is a character like Sherlock Holmes or something. Harry Dresden is is this kind of private eye. He's like from a hard-boiled detective story, but he's also a wizard. He's a wizard?
He's a wizard.
Like Gandalf?
Yep.
Like Merlin?
Yep.
Like Harry Potter?
Not quite like Harry Potter.
Not quite like Harry Potter. Like Dumbledore? But basically a wizard is a magic user. A man, usually, who uses magic, right? So yeah, we're thinking of Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, who's shooting lightning out of his hands and saying these magical words and doing all these things that you don't find in big American cities when people are trying to solve a crime. Who got killed? Bilbo Baggins?
Well, it might be that kind of story.
Okay.
Basically, the Dresden Files is an urban fantasy.
Oh, this would definitely be a subgenre.
Yes.
Like we learned yesterday.
So a fantasy is any story that shows a lot of imagination and is very different from real life. When we think of fantasy, we often think of the kind of stories like The Lord of the Rings, like Harry Potter, with magic and strange creatures and dragons.
Elves, dwarves, magic,
kind
swords, dragons,
Yeah. So an urban fantasy, as we'll find out, is one that's set in Earth in the real world,
Okay.
but it has some kind of this strange fantasy element going on in it. Harry Potter is almost like that because it's real world as well as the sort of magical world.
Okay, yeah, I
so
can see that.
Harry Potter's in there. We'll talk about a few more a bit later.
Okay.
Here's an example sentence for fantasy. Monica likes fantasy novels about animals that can do magic.
Okay, so real animals, of course, but these are animals that, unlike the real world, do magic. So let's find out about how this would work. What would we sort of be experiencing? What world would we be in if we read one of these stories? It says it's set in modern-day Chicago, big American city, but features magic and supernatural creatures such as fairies and vampires. So there you are, you're in Chicago, big buildings, Lake Michigan. It's all very much like Chicago. But instead of seeing people driving taxis and getting on buses, there's elves, there's dwarves, there's orcs, there's things like that. The types of animals and creatures and characters you would expect to see in a fantasy novel, not in a big American city. But of course, this is all explained because this is a world of magic. What is magic? Basically, magic is special powers that humans don't normally have. If you can shoot lightning out of your fingers by saying some magical words, that's magic. Some people would say if you can do a show where you can cut a lady in half or pull a rabbit out of a hat, that's magic, but it's just a trick. It's not real magic.
What?
But in fantasy novels, when Harry Potter is disappearing or Gandalf is shooting fire at some bad guys, that is real magic in the story.
And it is supernatural, which we're going to look at right now. So the word supernatural is used to refer to anything that's beyond nature, beyond what we think of as real natural stuff. We use the word supernatural to refer to ghosts, monsters, stories where gods come and interact with normal people, mysterious forces. So a lot of stories that have all of these kind of non-real magical things in them, we can describe that whole area of stuff as supernatural. And we've got a couple of examples of supernatural creatures here, starting with fairies.
That's right, a fairy is a fairy. It's a fairy. It's, you know, it flies around. It's often a very tiny lady, wings, magic, you know, usually like with stars or dust or something following it around. Basically, you guys have seen or you know the film or the story of Peter Pan, right? Tinkerbell, that cute little thing who's Peter Pan's friend and helps him out, she is a fairy. But if we look at other stories from the past, this fictional character is something that does magic. Often they live in forests.
Yep.
They live in the woods or something like that. And they're generally good, I think. Sometimes they can be naughty and use their magic to make two people fall in love or something like that. But basically, they're sort of magic-using small creatures or characters in fantasy novels or in fairy tales or things like that. And of course, in Peter Pan, probably, the example sentence says, probably the most famous fairy in the movies is Tinkerbell from Peter Pan.
Yeah, and another one of these supernatural creatures is the vampire.
Ugh.
Yeah, we probably all know what these are too. They're undead beings. They can't die. They live forever. They drink people's blood.
Ugh.
So Count Dracula, Edward from Twilight.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
A lot of other famous characters like that are vampires. So this is the kind of world that we are in with the Dresden Files.
Exactly. So it's a mix of real world sort of detectives and fantasy creatures. So what would you see in a typical story? It says Dresden investigates magical crimes that are too much for the Chicago police to handle. So if someone robs a bank with a gun, the normal police will chase that person. But when one wizard gets killed by using magic or something they call Harry Dresden, He's the detective in charge of magical crimes. Now, that doesn't mean these crimes are wonderful and magical, like I had a magical night with my friends when we watched the fireworks, meaning special and wonderful. No, this means involving magic, all right? So Harry Potter and his friends are at school and they learn magical knowledge. They learn knowledge and teachings about magic, all right? So anything involving magic, we can use magical as the adjective. For example, using Harry as another example, Harry Potter has a magical cloak that helps him become invisible. If I put on a cloak, it would cover my head, maybe keep me warm, because it's not magical. His is, he can disappear.
So that's one thing Dresden does. He will go and check out these magical crimes.
I guess you have to have a magical detective for your magical crimes.
He's also employed by strange clients. For example, he often looks out for a local monster's son.
Oh, this is kind of like Sherlock Holmes working with people on special things.
It's actually Bigfoot. Bigfoot,
Really?
the big monster in America in the mountains, says, you know, my son, he keeps getting into trouble. Can you look out for him? Can you keep him out of danger?
Wow.
Keep him off the streets,
Even
that kind of thing.
Bigfoot has trouble with his kids.
Yeah. So Bigfoot is his client. A client is a customer. And it's a particular kind of customer because rather than like a person who goes into a shop and buys something and leaves, that's more like a customer. A client is someone who goes and gets a service. If you are a cleaner, you have clients. If you are a lawyer, you would have clients. And if you are a detective, the people who come to see you and say, find my missing son, find out what happened to my money, this guy ran away with my wife, I want them found, you are a client. Okay? For example, Kelly's boss has gone out to meet some clients for lunch.
Okay, so some people she's probably had a long relationship with, she does work for them, they are her clients. So in this case, Harry Dresden, he has a strange client. This is apparently a monster, the Bigfoot monster. But Harry helps Bigfoot by looking out for his son. When you look out for something, well, I mean, you could be keeping an eye out, like you might be looking out for your friends as they walk down your street, or soldiers might look out for anything the enemy might be doing. But we're also just kind of saying, pay attention. You know, keep an eye open for something. Something could happen, and it's best if you sort of keep your head up and, you know, keep your brain working rather than just ignore it or take a nap or something like that. If I'm waiting for my friend and Pat's with me and I think my friend might be over there, I might say, I'll go over there, Pat, you stay here and look out for our friend, right? Just basically pay attention, and when they see them coming, do something to get their attention.
So that is how some of the early stories are, investigating a few small crimes, helping a few strange clients. But there are quite a lot of stories in this series, and things really change. The article says, as Dresden's career progresses, he becomes an even more powerful magic user. So he learns more spells. He gets very, very powerful. If you are powerful, then you are very strong. We could also describe something that works very well as powerful. A powerful car is going to go very fast. It's going to accelerate quickly and make a big noise. If a man is powerful, he may be big and strong, or he may have a lot of money and influence and can get what he wants. Here we're talking about a magic user. If you are a powerful magic user, you have spells that can, you know, destroy cities or make demons and gods go, oh, I'm staying away from that. So he has very strong magic. Here's another example with powerful. A race car has a much more powerful engine than a normal road car.
That's right. Bigger engine, faster engine, it got more power in it, it's more powerful. And so Harry, as he gets these powers, as he becomes more powerful, he's not just protecting Chicago from magical crimes. It says he takes on the role of protecting Earth from supernatural forces that want to lay waste to it. So he's not fighting crime in Chicago, he's fighting to save the world, fighting space demons, or who knows what he's fighting, but basically he's saving not just a few people in one city, but everyone on the planet, on Earth. So that was just saying that as Harry Dresden becomes more powerful as a magic user, he takes on bigger cases or more dangerous jobs. When you take something on, basically if we're talking about work or a job or a responsibility, you're accepting it. Someone is saying, I'd like you to do this. Can you do this? And you're saying, I can do that. I have the skills to do it. I have the time to do it. I'm interested in doing it. I want to try to do it. So it's probably something that you could say, no thanks, I don't want to do that. I'm not ready. I'm too busy. I'm not interested. But instead of saying no, you said, okay, I will do that. You didn't have to, but you chose to do something that gives you more responsibility or pressure or something like that. But you're willing, you're brave enough, you're going to try hard, and you're going to take it on. And some of the cases that he takes on sound pretty serious because some of these people, the article said, want to lay waste to the earth.
To lay waste to. This is quite a fancy phrasal verb that just means to destroy a thing, to turn it from a city into wasteland. You smash all the buildings, burn all the land, cut down all the trees, you lay waste to it. So, yeah, the Dresden Files are a very different kind of detective story.
Absolutely. It says there are detectives and detective stories for every taste. If you love fantasy and you want something a little unusual, try out the Dresden Files. But of course, there's the cozy mysteries. There's the classic mysteries like Sherlock Holmes. There's the hard-boiled style that's a little darker and more dangerous or something. But yeah, there are stories and styles for every taste.
Yep, the article says if you're a fan of this genre, you're in luck.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, this phrase, to be in luck, means you have good fortune. I've got good news for you. There is a good thing that will benefit you or work out nicely for you in this situation.
For sure. You'll never run out of wonderful news stories to read. We've mentioned, what, 5, 6, 7 of them? There are probably 5, 6, 700 different stories, thousands of different stories. So as it says there, you'll never run out of wonderful stories, wonderful characters, these books and these other things to enjoy. When you run out of something, that means you don't have anything of that, you don't have any of that thing left. Right? We run out of things at home. You might run out of milk or run out of toilet paper, or you might run out of time. Now you're going to be late. You have no more time. So it's something that we often have. We might have lots of it, but sometimes we get down to almost zero or we hit zero of that thing. We have run out of that thing. And it looks like we are quickly running out of time. So let's wrap it up and then go to our chat question. All right, so at the end of that article, we were learning about this subgenre of detective stories that mixes fantasy, magic, and that kind of thing with a classic murder mystery detective story. So that's kind of an interesting combination. So I think you're the perfect man to answer this question. Do you enjoy stories that mix magic and monsters with the real world, like the Dresden Files? And please explain your answer.
I do enjoy them up to a point.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, my explanation is it's really fun when you start to read these stories and you start to find something that's weird and you start to see how it kind of fits together. Yeah. But I find the more you read into the story, the more you're left wondering, well, wait a minute. If this was the real world, this surely would happen.
Okay.
You know, people would surely know about this by now. You can't keep kind of magic and mysteries and monsters secret from everybody for so long. And it's just like, oh, the main characters suddenly discovered it. It doesn't always work for me. So I like the starts of these stories, but I find the longer they go on, the less interesting they become because there are too many things that the author's like, don't think about that idea too hard or my story will break apart.
Right.
But there are some good ones. There are a lot of fun ones. Like you can do it well. Dracula.
Okay.
Where you've just got one single vampire in the world.
In the real world at the
off
time.
in the corner of the world somewhere, and it's 100 years ago, so there's no internet, there's not a lot of stuff like that. That is a fantastic kind of urban fantasy story.
Yeah.
But some of the others where it's like there are huge demon beings wanting to destroy the earth. not quite my cup of tea.
I see. So, for example, with those Dresden Files, the first stories you would have liked that.
Yep.
But then when he's protecting the Earth from dangers from space, you might think, wait, this guy's a policeman. What's he doing this for? Yeah, well, I can see how that would go. How about you guys? Do you enjoy stories that mix magic and monsters with the real world? Have you read any? Are you interested in it? It's definitely something you might want to check out if you're interested in either magic or monsters or detective mysteries. There's lots of great stuff out there for you to read. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you back here sometime very soon for more great articles. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Tough. As a nurse in the emergency room, Jamie has to be tough and deal with a lot of blood. Fantasy. The author is known for writing fantasy books that have a lot of talking animals. Fairy. In this story, a fairy makes a toy rabbit's wish come true and turns him into a real rabbit. Magical. People used to think metals had magical healing powers, but we know now this is not true. Client. I have a meeting with a new client today to talk about what business our companies will do together. Powerful. Master Liu is a powerful fighter. You don't have a chance at winning against him.
智慧小补帖
Inspiration. Corruption. Wizard. Supernatural. Vampire.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net